I remember him coming home and looking dusty and dirty. I suppose typical dad who worked on a building site. You know, when I spoke to the doctor in the hospital, it was, I didn't feel it was layman's terms, and I felt that, you know, being told that with that big long name, mesothelioma, which I couldn't even say, I didn't know what it was, and we were given leaflets. He spoke with Diane from Asbestos Action, and she explained in more depth, you know, why, not so much why, but, you know, how his cancer had been caused, and that it was in fact a cancer caused by exposure to asbestos. And then it began to make sense to him. But knowing that we had someone to help, someone to pick up a phone to, someone to answer questions, someone who knew about it, someone who could share experiences of others that had gone through the same illness, makes a huge difference, a huge difference. Things like I travelled through to my dad's as many days as I could in a week, which was like, you know, a 45, 50-minute drive after my work. There was days that maybe I couldn't manage and Diane would pop in, you know, give me a wee bit of respite. You know, I was working full time and then, you know, going through to my dad. She built a good relationship with my dad. There was a lot of trust there, a lot of support there, just a lot of really good positive stuff, which made, I think, it allowed me and my dad to have you know, a father-daughter relationship. So when you've got someone else that's kind of sharing the load with you, it makes a huge difference. So it gave us that quality time together. I think we always feel guilty about going on holiday when you've got, you know, a family member who has cancer, because you feel like you shouldn't be having a holiday. I really wasn't sure if I was going to go. And my dad had deteriorated a little bit, but then he seemed to get a lot better. And I ended up getting taken into hospital because he'd had a fall. I spoke to Asbestos Action, and Asbestos Action also said that they could support my dad, and they would, you know, make sure that he was okay in hospital, and if things did, you know, take a turn for the worst, that someone would be there with him. And, you know, that was a huge weight off my mind. My biggest fear was my dad being on his own. So Asbestos Action were in daily contact with me, and I only had a few days left, and the hospital phoned me and said that my dad had taken a turn for the worst, which really just sent me into panic mode. I was obviously very anxious on the way back, but at least I knew that he wasn't on his own. That was one of my biggest worries. So we got about an hour with my dad before he passed away. I think it was a good few weeks before I actually was able to thank her properly for what she'd done for my dad. To me, it was above and beyond any support I would have expected ever. To have someone with your loved one, a family member, to actually stay most of the night looking after someone in their final hours is just, I don't have words for that. I really don't. I don't have words. I would advise anyone who has been diagnosed with an asbestos-related illness, or who has a family member or loved one who's been diagnosed, to get in touch with Asbestos Action as soon as possible, and you'll find the support that you need throughout the illness. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for asking me along today, just to share a wee bit of my experience. So I'll start with the diagnosis of my dad. My dad had renal failure, so he was in hospital having dialysis, and he developed quite a bad chest, which was, we thought, just a cold, a cough, and it didn't clear up even with antibiotics. So then it was pneumonia that he had, but still the hospital weren't very happy, you know, how his chest was going. So then he had further tests, and I was at work one day and got a call to go to the hospital to speak with the consultant. And, you know, because I'm like an hour's drive away from my dad, I got there and I think you just know that something's wrong. So when I got there, I met with the consultant and my dad, and he said that, you know, he had a lung condition, it was a cancer. And I think when you hear cancer, cancer's cancer, but it was mesothelioma, which I didn't have a clue what it was. And the consultant explained that there wasn't a cure as such for it. And then it was just, everything was so overwhelming. So I think what I wanted to do was find out how long my dad had, and ask the consultant on his own. And he said roughly about 6 months. I don't know if my dad knew this because I'd asked the consultant outside the room. And then I was given some leaflets, which I didn't know what they were. My mind wasn't with me, and I just went home and my head was kind of racing. And like I think Christina said earlier, between the time of getting these leaflets and the diagnosis to the time of speaking to someone from Asbestos Action, I couldn't even tell you. I just remember getting a phone call and speaking with someone who arranged to come and visit my dad and myself, and basically explain a little bit about what they'd done, and what the diagnosis, what to expect. You know, I had so many questions that I wanted to ask. I didn't feel there was a lot of signposting at the time of his diagnosis, and I just kind of went away home and just not forgot about it. But you just don't know what to do at that stage. So when Asbestos Action, it was Diane who came along as a support worker, and she really, really helped. Things with like emotional support, practical support, even things that you wouldn't think about. You know, my dad, he looked quite well, but you know, he wasn't himself, and things that, even going out for a coffee, which was great. As he started to get a bit, you know, more unwell, he found it hard to get out the car and going in for coffee. And things like getting a blue badge, which I would never have known to think about, you know, which is quite a practical thing. And my dad, being my dad, you know, he got this blue badge and you'd thought he'd won the lottery. He phoned me at work, and me with my phone, thinking something's wrong, my dad's number, and saying, I've got a blue badge. He says, you'll never guess, we can go to Wales and park for 2 hours. You know, and that was just my dad, that was his sense of humour, and that's just what he was like. So, you know, all these little things, and I think as well for Asbestos Action, taking the time to do things like help fill out the forums, because that time's precious. You know, my dad, like others, had, you know, limited time left. So it gave me and my dad more time together, and I felt that I actually got to know my dad better because we spent more time together. So all of these things, it was like a weight lifted off myself, because the time is just so precious. Also, when my dad was in hospital, well, when he was going in for dialysis 3 times a week, and you know, there was times that he went in, he couldn't drive his car anymore, so he had to go hospital transport. It didn't work in with the dialysis unit, so he had to wait sometimes 2 hours on a bed to get dialysis. And you know, he was really, really upset, and you know, I can't say I blame him, but and I know that hospitals are busy. You know, I spoke to the ward manager, and she said, I'll see what I can do. I don't know if it's because my dad had another serious illness that it was kind of, you know, not set aside, but not really taken seriously. And I spoke to Diane about it, and she came in with me to an appointment just to say, you know, look, 2 hours out of somebody who's got 6 months to live's life is just, it's horrible. It really is horrible. You know, I felt it from my dad, and I just felt so guilty that I couldn't do anything. So, you know, I had to do something about it, and that's where I think Diane helped as well, because she could speak for me when I couldn't. And sometimes we don't know these things until we come over it ourselves, and that was my experience of learning as I went along, but having support with that. I can't really say an awful lot more, apart from in my dad's kind of final months, I was going on holiday, and I felt so guilty. I felt awful, but I was through at my dad's almost every night after working a full day. I had 55 minutes drive through to my dad's, and I was exhausted. I was broken, I was exhausted. I really needed a break, but you still have the guilt, will I go, will I not go? And my dad had been keeping okay. So my dad had said, you need to go your holiday, just go. And Asbestos Action, Diane, she said, you know, look, we'll make a plan, and, you know, we'll get something in place for your dad. I was going to phone, Diane was going to phone or pop in. And what happened, as you heard in the film, was that he had a fall and he was taken into hospital. So I knew that he was in good hands, and he was adamant that I'd go on my holiday. And I did go on my holiday. And every day on my holiday, Diane was communicating with me daily, and the hospital. I would phone up and see how he was. And I wouldn't say it was an enjoyable holiday, because I think with any cancer, you just don't know when something's going to happen. It's going to, you know, when the person's going to die. It was never my experience. So one day I got a phone call just to say, you know, your dad's taking a turn for the worse. Can you get home? So I was in Spain, which is only a few hours flight away. But I had to get a flight as soon as I could, travelling from Spain to Glasgow. I got the call about 11 in the morning. And my worst fear ever was that my dad would die alone. That was my worst fear. I was absolutely terrified that he would be left on his own. So I think because Diane had always said, you know, your dad won't be alone, I told her my worst fear. And she said, you know, I'll sit with your dad until you get home. So being so far away, it was just a horrendous journey, just a really horrible journey. But I got home as soon as I could, and every step of the way, like from leaving where I was staying, it was messaging to Diane. She'd message back, then getting to the airport, and she was relaying this to my dad, so he knew every stage of where I was. And then it was, you know, Glasgow, and she's telling my dad, that's Michelle in Glasgow, she's on her way. And of course I had to get to Kirkcaldy. I usually go to Edinburgh Airport, which is nearer, but this time, of course, it was Glasgow. And eventually, I got there to be with my dad. And when I got to the ward door, you know, Diana said, you know, just your dad might not be the same as you know he was before you left. So that was, I suppose, kind of preparing me just, you know, for seeing my dad not as he wasn't awake, but he was still aware. So I managed to go in, and I sat with my dad and I took his hand, and, you know, I got about an hour with my dad. As soon as I went in, Diane left, and I got about an hour with my dad, and I just felt, you know, I spoke away to him, and he just passed away so peacefully. And I felt that there was nothing left unturned, and, you know, I think having the support of someone being there in my absence, it I just I can't find words for that. But the main thing is I got to see my dad before he died, and all the support that I had from Asbestos Action was fantastic. The last thing I'm going to say is that before my dad passed away, I had a notion to do the Looney Duke. I don't know if anybody knows about the Looney Duke, but it was New Year's Day that you go and jump in South Queensferry dressed up in a silly costume. And I thought to myself, well, I would really like to do something like that, just in memory of my dad, and I'll raise a wee bit of money for the charity that's helped me. And then I thought, I told my dad I was going to do it. I didn't say in his memory because he was still alive at the time, but I really wanted to do it. And then I thought, I need somebody. I can't go and moan. I just can't do mowing. And then I thought, there must be another loony or nutter out there that I can get roped in to do this. So, of course, I asked Diane, who, of course, I don't know if I asked her or twisted her arm, but it doesn't matter. She agreed to do it anyway, and that's what I've done on the 1st of January 2019. So, yeah, that was my experience. And when we done our Looney Duke, it was really, really just in memory of my dad, and it just made me feel so good. And I can't thank Asbestos Action Tayside enough. Thank you very much for listening.